I am here on Giant Steps with Alexander Flood, the incredibly talented Australian drummer and producer who has just released his brilliant second album, The Space Between. So, hello, Alexander. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
To go straight into the new record, then, where did the title The Space Between come from, and how does it capture the themes of the record?
The space between, I guess the title itself is really referencing what the music is, and it's finding a sound in between genre and kind of between or outside of boundaries and outside of expectation and really blending together or bringing together different musical perspectives and sounds and palettes from around the world. So yeah, the space between kind of was a fitting title, but also I guess it's another way of thinking of rhythm. For me, I think of rhythm as, or I think of the important aspect of rhythm being the space between the notes, like the gaps, as opposed to the notes themselves, because it is often the space that makes music what it is rather than the notes. Yeah, so that's kind of where the title came from.
Nice. And you said there a little bit about blending genres together on this record, and you do incorporate a wide range of them beyond just jazz. You sort of have elements of hip hop, UK garage, bit of house in there as well. Was this a very conscious decision before you started the process to try and experiment with this sort of variety of influences, and how did they actually weave their way into the sound on the record?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a kind of goal of mine, an intention of mine through my music, from very early on to be able to bring together all sorts of different, not only kind of sounds, but instruments and rhythms from all across the globe. So looking at different cultures of music, and I've been very fortunate to grow up my parents are very passionate travelers, and so from a very early age, from a young age, I was kind of exposed to travel all around the world, and um, to Europe, Asia, the Middle East, the US, all across the world. So um, early on, having influences of different cultures and seeing different perspectives, different ways of life, experiencing different places and people and languages and things like this, played a really big role in my development artistically, creatively, the way that I write, the music that I listen to, where that influence comes from. So it was kind of a natural step forward for me to write music that draws on these influences and kind of aims to bring down the barriers and can unify them together and allow them to interact and speak together in this shared kind of musical environment.
Do you have a favorite place from your travels that you visited that you think particularly inspired your creativity?
Um, a big one more recently, like I've these I've yeah, these trips go back to when I was 7 or younger, but more recently I was in London a couple of years ago, and that for me that really opened my eyes to a lot of the music that I'm delving into nowadays. So as you mentioned before, some of the UK garage and house stuff and jungle, that sort of sound, the I guess the more dance music approach to a jazz sound is kind of where my music's the direction my music is starting to head in. So yeah, London was definitely a big spot for me
Hmm,
more recently.
nice. Well, I love the track London on the album as well.
Yeah, that one definitely was, yeah, inspired by my
Hmm.
time there.
And to go sort of to the opening song of the album, All for the Pocket. That's another great track that features rapper Nelson Dialect and evolves into this sort of big go-go funk jam at the end. I read a little description you posted about the track on your Instagram, and it sort of came across as a very collaborative process. So can you tell us a little bit about the origin of this track and sort of how these collaborations fueled its conception?
Yeah, this one was really collaborative. I have some friends over in DC. They live just outside of DC, a drummer and a piano player, really, really incredible musicians by the name of Nick Capron and his brother Ben Capron. And I went and spent a week with them in 2019. I stayed with them and we kind of just played music all day, talked about music all day, listened to music all day. That's all we did for a week, basically. It was a bit of a break in my travels, and it was just great to just geek out on music stuff. But from there, so they kind of showed me some go-go stuff, which is like a regional funk from DC. Uh, yeah, and this was basically the first time that I had heard this stuff, and they showed me some of it and sent me some recordings, and I took that away and listened to a bunch of that. Then when I was back in Australia, I at the time was checking out Nelson Dialect's kind of catalog of music, and yeah, really liked his sound, really liked what he was doing. And obviously he's from Adelaide. He was living over in the States at the time, but he's from here. So being a local artist, I did really want to, do something together, collaborate together. So I started writing this kind of go-go thing, and then it evolved into, it was sort of reverse engineered. It started with the go-go thing and then went back to the hip hop thing, which is, the track obviously presents the two in the opposite order, but yeah, so when it kind of came together and I had this sort of rhythm section stuff going on, I thought it would be a great fit for Nelson and wanted to give him, as much freedom as possible. So I essentially just sent him the track. We had a Zoom call to chat about, what we could potentially, what he could write about, what the intention there is. But ultimately it was all his, I didn't want to give him any restraints creatively. So he wrote on that, and then the cherry on top was the two friends in DC. They actually connected me with Brian Boogie BJ Scott, otherwise known as Mr. DMV, who is quite a well-known kind of real deal DC go-go conga player. And he put the conga part on the go-go outro, which just like made it go-go. So yeah, that's how it all came together. But that was that was one of the more kind of cross global collaborative tracks.
Nice. Well, there are a number of sort of other brilliant musicians and vocalists featured on this record as well, one of which is the great American trumpet player Christian Scott Atunde Adjoa. He features on the track Pathways, and you've described him as a friend and a mentor, but how did you first cross paths, and how special was it to have him play on this record?
First of all, it was incredibly special to have him be a part of this project. We've worked together on my previous release, sort of through his label a couple of years ago, and then this year through his label again. But to have him playing on it is really a dream come true. The first time we met, I went to a show of his. He was playing here in Australia. I went to see, it was the Miles Electric Band. They were on tour. And anyway, yeah, saw the show, got to meet him after the show and chatted a little bit. Fast forward however long, I don't know, a year or so, saw him at another festival. Then I was over in the States. We hung out some more. We got talking. We were kind of sharing what we were, working on at the time. And I played him some of my music at the time, which was my previous album, or at least the demos of my previous album at the stage that it was at that point. And yeah, he really liked it. So he wanted to kind of give me a platform to help me release it into the world through his label, and the rest is history.
Well, it's a great collaboration on that track as well. It's a really nice addition hearing his trumpet playing. But sort of alongside the album, you also released this short documentary, sort of a companion piece, directed and produced by yourself as well, that chronicles the behind the scenes and has some nice interviews with the guest collaborators. But can you tell us a little bit about how this came about, and is this something you're hoping to do with your future records as well?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I didn't plan to make this film or this short documentary when I started the project. I had a whole project plan, and I had a budget and everything, and a part of that, I had video production, and I was going to have all the sessions filmed, but that was kind of the extent of my planning in advance. But then kind of on the fly, in the weeks leading up to the sessions, I realized that, okay, we're going to have all this video content. It would be, filming of all the sessions. It would be great to document some of the behind the scenes. And then these sessions happening overseas, I would love to be able to document that as well. and then once I started kind of compiling all this, I guess all this media, all this video, I started to write essentially I mean, it was just a short summary of how it could all fit together and a structure and what I needed in order to fill in the blank. So as I went, I kind of thought, okay, now I'd love to be able to present this part of the project here, and so let's shoot this, or set up, like you said, a few interview spots and things like that. So it all kind of fell into place as the project evolved and as we kind of made our way through it. But ultimately, I was kind of sat here in my studio for, I don't want to know how many hours, compiling all the footage, editing it all, color grading it all, with the help of my kind of film production mentor, David Reski, who, we worked tirelessly on the film. So, I'm really pleased, really proud with how that turned out. And it's really nice to have that document of this time and this process.
I saw that you actually got to play a small gig in a cinema as part of the celebration of this documentary and the album. How was this as an experience? How special was that night as a whole for you?
Yeah, I had COVID about a month ago, and while I was in my little isolation period, stuck at home, I started thinking, okay, I'd love to book a show, like an album release show, and I do have a couple shows coming up, but I thought I want to do something sooner, and I want to do a screening of the film. So logically, I thought, all right, I'll call some local cinemas and find out if I can, hire a space. And as it turns out, it was a pretty smooth process to lock in this venue. But I didn't know how we'd go playing live music in the venue, but it worked. It was great. It was a really, really interesting, acoustic space to play in. Obviously, it's not designed for live music, but it was a really cool way to be able to kind of push the album out into the world and screen the film and to a local audience. And that was really special because it is such a it has been an international kind of collaborative project, but to be able to share it first with friends and family and a local audience was that was really cool to be able to do that.
Nice. I think it'd be quite cool if there was more gigs in cinemas actually, or even just maybe like a little band that played before the film starts.
Yeah, we might have to make it a regular thing.
Now, to go back in time a little bit now to sort of when you first started playing the drums, how was it that you actually picked up this instrument and then entered into the world of music?
So when I was about 7 years old, a couple of my best friends at the time, once a week would get to leave class to have a music lesson, to learn drums. And because they were having lessons in pairs. So all I saw from my perspective was two best friends leaving class together and just having fun, right? So the following year, I signed up for drum lessons, thinking that, great, I'm going to be able to leave with my friends to go have lessons. But I was paired with someone else that wasn't necessarily a best friend of mine. So I was sort of in this environment where I wasn't just there to, muck around with my friends. I kind of there to learn drums now. So but very quickly, I guess, fell in love with the instrument. That opened my eyes and my ears to different types of music. I was starting to play in ensembles from a pretty young age, and then it all kind of grew, and it still is growing, I guess.
Well, yeah, who knew that the desire to skip a bit of school would have sparked interest. Now here on Giant Steps, being a jazz show, a question I always like to ask guests is that if you had to recommend one jazz track to someone new to the genre, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a really tough. That's a really, really tough. I'm gonna say, something off of "In a Silent Way" by Miles Davis.
Nice.
Or the whole "In a Silent" is 2 tracks, or four parts cut into 2 tracks. Because I guess it captures so much about what jazz is, and there's history in it, but there's also so much contemporary influence and pushing of boundaries, and sonically there's such a I guess a forward pushing palette on that record, and the way it's constructed is, yeah, I think I would be, if that was the first recording that I listened to, I think I would be stoked. I think I would be keen to check out more. But yeah, that's a hard question. I'd have to really sit for some time to come up with some other. But yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good entry into the genre, starting off with Inner Sound Away. Starting off with a lot of that era of Miles, I think would be a good way in. But yeah, so sort of finally we're gonna play your track Nostalgia next on the show, which features the beautiful strings of the guzheng and the erhu, two instruments native to China. I'm sure I might have butchered their pronunciations there, but how did this track come about, and how did you first interact and sort of discover the sounds of these instruments?
So I was on this tour in 2019, the same tour that took me to London, and we did a couple weeks of shows in Shanghai, and I'm going to get the name wrong. I think it's Jinling Road in Shanghai is this street of music shops, musical instrument shops, music schools, record stores, you name it. Just like, it's just music stores. And I think Istanbul has the same thing, just like a street just full of all the music stores. Anyway, so I went to this street, and yeah, just walking down, and going into a few shops here and there, and I kept hearing these instruments being played, whether it was people who were just sitting working in the store playing the erhu violin, or in another store it was a music school and there was guzheng lessons happening. So a lady teaching another lady guzheng, just kind of the sound just kind of bleeding out into the street. And it was really beautiful. And the sounds in that environment and kind of that experience, I really held on to that and wanted to be able to draw on those emotive strings and that experience. But then also the whole experience, the whole emotion of nostalgia itself is, very, very connected to my travels and things like that. So, yeah, it made sense to make these instruments kind of a highlight of this track, but not in a conventional way. There's no jazz solo played by there's no bebop licks being played on the guzheng or erhu, but yeah, to kind of really integrate it into the rhythm section and into the band, and not just sitting on I didn't want it to just be in the spotlight, kind of separate from this Rhodes or piano rather at that point in the track, piano, bass and drums. I didn't want it to kind of feel separate. I wanted to make it feel integrated. So yeah, that was the approach with using the guzheng on that track. And yeah, as I said, the track is kind of about being nostalgic.
Well, I think they're definitely integrated very nicely into that track, and that street sounds amazing. Definitely going to try and visit that if I ever get over to China.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. A lot of piano stores, so if you like pianos, there's plenty of stuff.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show and talking to me.
Yeah, thanks heaps for chatting.
For everyone out there, Alexander Flood's latest album, The Space Between, is out now. A brilliant record. Go check it out. But for now, here's another great track from it in the form of Nostalgia.